President Cyril Ramaphosa has assured world leaders who are gathered for the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, that they can look at South Africa as an investment destination. Now, the president says that South Africa offers numerous benefits to investors, which include political stability following the formation of the Government of National Unity. The president says that a stable energy supply is one of the recent achievements that were made by his administration. Now, the WEF convenes global leaders every year to address key global and regional challenges. And these include, of course, responding to geopolitical shocks, stimulation of growth to improve living conditions and standards, and stewarding a just and inclusive energy transition. But for some analysis on what's come out of that gathering so far, we join on the line, or rather virtually now, by Chief Economist at the Efficient Group, Dawie Roodt. Dawie, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much and good morning to you.
So Team South Africa, obviously optimistic, but what would you say is the key difference that they take to the WEF this year?
Well, I think, first of all, one must say that the World Economic Forum, this meeting every year, is very important. This is a showcase. This is a shoulder rubbing opportunity. This is an opportunity to sort of see if you can make business or do business with other business leaders in the world. But this year, the World Economic Forum is totally overshadowed by what is happening in the United States. Donald Trump, has certainly been a Donald Trump week, and it certainly is going to be the Donald Trump year. But having said that, yes, South Africa this year will also chair the G20. And I think what the president is certainly doing already is laying out what he expects to do during the South Africa's leadership of the G20. There are a couple of things that the president already mentioned. One is, and he did mention that before the World Economic Forum, and that is that South Africa will participate in this minimum tax on companies internationally, for example. Now, I mentioned that because that is in exact contradiction to what Donald Trump just said. He said that he will not participate in that. The president also emphasized, for example, South Africa's continuous participation in global issues, especially climate issues. And again, Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord, for example. So clearly, there are a number of issues that is likely to lead to some sort of political clash over the next couple of months. But the president is trying to make it clear that South Africa is open for business, that South Africa is politically stable, as you mentioned, for example. But again, if you compare that to some other institutions, like, for instance, last week, The Economist, the newspaper The Economist, referred to South Africa and Nigeria and Egypt as those three major countries in the world, in Africa, actually, that is keeping economic growth back in Africa. So yes, the president is certainly trying to portray South Africa as an investment destination, political stability and all of that, but I'm afraid there are many institutions and many other political forces that will probably disagree with the president.
Indeed, Dawie. And, speaking of, if you look at the WEF's own report, its Futures of Growth report, and where they look at South Africa and they say that report shows that South Africa's economy is not competitive globally. They outline some of the key features that they look at, and out of the four key ones, sustainability was the only indicator where South Africa actually achieved, above the global average, but they were significantly short on innovativeness, resilience, and inclusiveness. So we've been seeing this, we've been talking about this, also mentioning the fact that obviously because of our economic stagnation, we see our population growth outstripping our economic growth, and that in itself is problematic.
In the end, what really matters is economic growth. Now, you are absolutely correct. If you look at what's been happening on a per capita basis in South Africa for most of the past 15 years, we have been getting poorer on a per capita basis. We're waiting for the final numbers of 2024, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see economic growth well below 1%. And again, we will be getting poorer, or we got poorer. in 2024. This year, the estimates on economic growth vary. Some institutions suggest 1% economic growth, while the president reckons, or government reckons, it's going to be close to about 2%. I don't think we're going to get to 2%. If we're lucky, we will get to about 1.5%. And again, that means a stagnating per capita GDP in South Africa. So I'm afraid the South African economy is not the growth story. It is not a very optimistic story about economic growth in South Africa. Yes, it's certainly a little bit better than what we had previously. And I think Government of National Unity is certainly contributing to improved conditions in South Africa, but not much. The fact that Eskom is actually working a little bit better now, that we have better access to energy, that certainly is contributing to slightly better economic prospects in South Africa. But all of that together might get South Africa over 1%, perhaps 1.5%. But that is just not good enough. We need to grow the economy at much, much faster rates. We need to grow 3, 4, 5%. And I'm afraid with the current policies in place, it's unlikely for the economy to grow at that sort of levels. And keep in mind, there are many potential headwinds ahead. And I keep on referring to Donald Trump as an example, but he is going to dictate to a large extent what is going to happen in the world of economics over the next couple of years. And it's clear to me that South Africa is heading for a clash with the Americans at various levels. And that, of course, will have a huge impact on economic growth as well.
So that is the key factor, whether we're talking Davos, whether we're talking G20 or whatever else. The fact of the matter is our economic growth has stagnated. And Dawie, we keep talking. I don't know how many conversations you and I have engaged in, how many conversations you have engaged in on other platforms. But at what point do we get beyond the rhetoric? At what point do we stop talking and where government starts doing so that we do see a 5% economic growth?
I'm afraid, really to simplify things and to make it really simple. And economics is really straightforward. And there are basically 3 things that you need to do. You have to protect private property rights. You have to encourage and protect free trade. And you have to provide sound money, low inflation. Those are the 3 things that you need to do. If you look at the South African government, yes, we have a so-called Government of National Unity. But ideologically, it is still the ANC that is in charge. And the ANC's basic ideology is an ideology of so-called developmental state. Let's call it socialist. They call one another comrade and things like that. Nothing has really changed. Many economists, many business people are referring to South Africa and saying that South Africa does not have policy clarity. We have very clear policies in South Africa, and the policies are that of a state, of a political party that believes in intervention. They believe in the centralization of power. They believe that they have to make decisions just about everything in the economy. And as long as we have that, we will not grow this economy. So I think the bottom line I want to get to is that the underlying ideology of government is still the ANC's ideology. It's the wrong ideology, leading to the wrong policies, leading to the kind of economic outcome that we've had for most of the past couple of decades. And until we change that, the economic prospects of South Africa simply will not change. Now, it's easy to point out specific things that we need to do. We have to improve the efficiency of the state. We have to privatize. We have to do A, B, and C. We know all of those sort of things. But the main thing here is that we've got a government that believes they can do things better than the private sector. And in fact, it's not only a government that believes they can do things better than the private sector. They're actually quite bad at doing all sort of things. And quite often they even corrupt. All those things add up and leading to weak economic growth. We have to understand that we need to change the underlying ideology. And I'm afraid that seems that we need to change the political setup in South Africa before we can talk about stronger economic growth.
And the ideological question is a rather complex one. But looking at state-owned entities, for example, we just showed a picture of Transnet and some of their fleet. You look at these entities, some of these state-owned entities, you look at Eskom, for example, South Africa going to Davos saying that, at least we have a stabilizing energy supply. There are structural reforms afoot there. You look at those entities as an example and you say, well, as you say, they are poorly run at the moment. There is a lot of corruption involved. But surely these are entities that, if they are correctly run, could make a difference, couldn't they?
Yes, of course, without a doubt. And let's be honest about it. I've got a sense that Eskom is much better run than in the past. So yes, let's give credit where it's due. I also have a sense that Transnet is perhaps going to be turned around soon. And that is because of private sector participation. So yes, there are some silver linings. I also know that the financial markets reacted positive on a government of national unity. And I also got the sense that generally speaking, government is becoming a little bit less inefficient. So there are, without a doubt, but some changes. And that's the reason why I think economic growth is not going to be stuck below 1% like what it used to be not too long ago, but we probably can move that up to 1.5% or so over the next year or two, three. But that is just not good enough. We've got a population that's growing at about 1.5%. We need to grow the economy much, much faster. We've got unemployment levels, poverty levels that are all rising. And people in South Africa are getting poorer. Just compare South Africa's per capita GDP to other countries in the world. We're falling behind. Not only are we falling behind, very poor countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, are actually catching up with South Africa. So clearly what we've been doing recently is just not good enough. Yes, there are some improvement, and let's give credit where it's due, but we need to do much, much more. Or perhaps what we need to do is for government to get out of the way and allow the private sector to do what they are good at, and that is growing the economy.
So, as you said, opportunity to perhaps strike some deals or get some conversations going in the right direction to the country's benefit. We heard the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, talking about the South African delegation will go, and they won't hide the challenges that we face, but they will go to Davos with a message that the country is progressing in addressing some of these challenges. Foreign direct investment, what do those FDI investors want to hear from South Africa right now?
Yeah, well, let me just, you mentioned the Minister of Finance just now, and I think, by the way, that we have to give credit there as well. Next month will be the budget of the Minister of Finance. He's been trying his utmost to cut back on state expenditure, but I've just read the last couple of days that they're offering the civil servants another 5.5% increase. Those are the kind of things that investors do not want to hear. They want to hear that the civil servants will get an increase at inflation or below inflation. They want to see, for example, that we've got a highly efficient state machinery, which we do not have in South Africa. They want to see that the state will get out of the way and do things on labor policy, as an example. They want to see that we improve the quality of education and skills development in South Africa. Those are the kind of things. And of course, very importantly, crime. Crime is a major problem in South Africa. Foreigners, I talk to foreigners quite a lot, and that's the first thing they always ask me, but is it safe to be in South Africa? So yes, there are so many things that we need to do. But again, it comes down to the three things that matters. Protection of private property rights, free trade and sound money. And I'm afraid on neither of those three are we doing very well. Except, of course, the South African Central Bank. The Reserve Bank is doing an excellent job with the way that they manage monetary policy. But for the rest, there's so much more that we can do to improve the macroeconomic environment and make South Africa more attractive for international and local investors.
Well, we'll have to leave it there, Dawie. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And that was Dawie Roodt, Chief Economist at the Efficient Group, giving analysis about the World Economic Forum at Davos in Switzerland.